Ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished actor, director, producer, and thinker, John Houseman.
As a producer and director, I've attended a lot of meetings. Now, is the one you're attending today going to be just another meeting, or is it going to be something more, a meeting of the minds? Now, before you get started, I want to talk with you about your mind and about thinking, the process of using your gray matter in sophisticated and creative ways. My thoughts are guided by this book, Brain Power, by Dr. Karl Albrecht. He points out that thinking is a built-in skill, and that while all of us know how to think, we don't think very much. Moreover, he feels that intelligent people, when assembled in an organization, will tend toward what he calls collective stupidity. Now, you're obviously in an organization, and you're obviously assembled. Is this meeting going to be an example of collective stupidity, or is it going to be what a meeting should be, a constructive interchange of human minds at work? Now, let me ask you something important. If you decided to think more effectively during this meeting, what would the benefits be to you as an individual and to the group as a whole? There are things you can do here today that will develop important thinking skills, skills which will make this a better meeting and make you all more effective thinkers. Interested? Follow me. In the paper chase, I appeared in a set much like this as Professor Kingsfield, Harvard Law, who waged a never-ending campaign to turn his students into thinkers. This is an appropriate place for us to be talking because what I want to discuss with you today concerns a key mental process. We call this process perception, and we use that broad term to describe the way we take in and interpret new information, ideas, and points of view. When your meeting gets underway, a lot of new ideas will be presented. How well you react to these ideas will be governed by how you perceive them. So, it is important, I think, for us to look at how we perceive. There are three principles of perception. The first of these is the principle of recognition. Recognition describes the process wherein we attempt to relate what we see with something we already know. It enables us to deal with a wide variety of information without getting bogged down in detail. The danger, though, is that sometimes in our rush to process information, we may overlook details or key points that might actually be significant. Let me show you how easy it is to overlook details. If you're wearing a watch, I want you to cover it with your hand. Now, without looking at it, try to recall the face of your watch. Are the numbers Roman or Arabic numerals? If it's digital, tell me what words or labels appear on the face. Difficult, isn't it? How many times do you suppose you've looked at that watch? 1,000? 10,000? Okay. Uncover your watch now and look at it. I hope there's enough light, because otherwise it's going to drive you crazy. Details are often important. Now, in your meeting today, someone may present an idea that you think you recognize, but do you? As we've seen, recognition represents your brain's attempt to match new information with something it already knows. But what happens when you see or hear something that is new, something that defies classification? In that case, the brain actually bends the new information and interprets it into something that it can recognize. This process is called perceptual interpretation. The problem comes when the brain, in its rush to classify, interprets information in a deceptive way. a great deal of misinformation stems from errors in interpretation. When we expect to see a particular thing, we may see it even if it isn't there. Some examples. First, kindly look at this geometric figure. No, it isn't Pac-Man. It's simply a circle with a wedge removed. Now, would you believe that by putting 5 of these together, I could make you see a star? Can you see the star? Of course you can. But of course you can't, because there is no star there. Your brain is simply filling in the missing information to make a complete pattern where none exists. Conversely, our brains may conveniently edit out features which don't match up. Look at this side. What does it say? Paris in the spring? Look again. Paris in the spring. In many cases, our brain converts incoming data into what we think it should be. Now let me show you another illustration of our brain's desire for convenient information. Here now is part of a figure for you to study. It appears to be a U-shaped object of some sort, a magnet or a horseshoe perhaps. Now here is another part of that figure. 3 cylinders or rods. And now that you're familiar with the elements, let's see how well you do with interpreting the figure as a whole. Problems. This object does not seem to hold still in space, but in fact what jumps around is your brain's conclusion about what it sees. Since your brain cannot resolve the image to only one of 2 possible interpretations, you cannot arrive at a satisfactory conclusion. Notice how you feel in the face of ambiguity. You lack the comfortable feeling of having classified a perceptual message. You may even feel slightly annoyed. To recap the principle of interpretation, be careful how you interpret the thoughts and ideas which will occur in your meeting. Don't be in such a rush. You may see something that isn't there, or fail to see something that is there. And especially important, be willing to tolerate a little ambiguity. Don't jump to find a tried and true interpretation. Be willing to stretch and struggle a little. That is how you grow. The final perceptual principle is that of expectation. Expectation is the strongly held readiness to perceive one particular thing as opposed to alternative possibilities. Expectation controls much of our perception. We tend to organize our thoughts in terms of an expectation. What we expect to see and hear has a lot to do with how we react to new ideas and even to other people. The most amazing illustration of this is not something I can show you, but I'll tell you about it. Several years ago, Dr. David Rosenhan, a Stanford University professor, conducted an experiment. He had 8 perfectly normal people show up at various mental hospitals and make up a story about themselves, incorporating textbook symptoms in order to get admitted. But once inside, the subjects began to tell the truth, that it was all an experiment. Now, here's the interesting part. No one would listen. All the subjects were diagnosed as seriously maladjusted, ranging from neurotic to schizophrenic. These doctors obviously were working from very powerful unconscious expectations. Expectations like these can very well start a closed-loop, self-fulfilling prophecy. And I urge you to be careful of the same kind of limiting expectation as you approach your meeting. We tend to get what we expect to get. What are you expecting? You get paid to think. If you're going to earn your money today, remember that to perceive well is to think well. Expectation, interpretation, recognition. Are you willing to truly think, to open your mind, and not to rush to interpret? Are you willing to look closely at detail, to ask questions? I hope so. Because if you are, this room can vibrate with a unique energy. Human minds at work. Brains.